It was dark, pitch dark, but by now the darkness had become all too familiar to him. He felt only one thing, the ability to move just one thing, and he did as he felt light return once more. One eye opened, colored blue and crimson red. When Ryuk opened his eyes fully, he found himself in a throne room that seemed all too familiar. Except this time, his gaze landed where he would normally be seated, crumpled helplessly to the ground. Right now, though, he was the one sitting on the throne, and without even looking, he could already feel the familiar presences behind him. This throne room was none other than his soul place. Anytime I come here, it's always because something has gone wrong, Ryuk said, sitting upright on the throne. What has gone wrong this time? He asked aloud. And then they appeared before him. Both the red-scaled Null, representing his Nullic bloodline, and the blue-scaled Null, representing his Draconic bloodline. They eyed him, part of their gaze filled with suspicion, but most of all with confusion. That alone was enough to alert Ryuk. He knew these two were never clueless. They always knew everything. Yet this time they looked lost. What's wrong? Ryuk asked again. The crimson-scaled Ryuk answered first. We have no idea. All we know is... The blue-scaled one took over, drawing back his sleeve to reveal his scaly arm. Ryuk's eyes narrowed. The blue-scaled Ryuk should, by default, have blue-colored scales. But now, from his right wrist to the elbow, the color of his scales had changed, becoming milky white. Ryuk's gaze sharpened. The color of your scales changed? In response, the blue-scaled Ryuk slashed the white-scaled part. Immediately, milky white notes of light rained down. Then, he moved his hand higher, above the elbow where the scales remained blue, and slashed again. This time, blue notes of light descended. Ryuk understood instantly. The color didn't just change. The bloodline essence within the scales itself has changed. It's what happens when a bloodline undergoes a mutation, the blue-scaled Ryuk explained. But it doesn't make sense for your bloodline to be mutating. Ryuk frowned, brows knitting. Why? Let me explain better, he said, as a second throne appeared in the room and he sat down. When a child is born, they inherit a bloodline. In your case, your mother was a dragon, and your father was a Null. In most cases, the purer bloodline usually dominates. That means you were supposed to either have a Draconic bloodline or a Nullic one. Even in rare instances where both awaken, one is almost always overwhelmingly dominant while the other is weak. He paused as Ryuk nodded in understanding. But your case is special. You awakened both, like any other dual bloodline holder, but instead of one overpowering the other to near uselessness, both of your bloodlines maintained the same level of power. And why is that? Ryuk asked. It's due to the nature of the original bloodlines, the crimson-scaled Ryuk explained. You see, the Null bloodline and the Draconic bloodline both belong to a rare category, overpowering bloodlines. In short, if either of these bloodlines merges with any other, they always dominate, erasing the weaker bloodline entirely and allowing only one to exist. But what happens when you cross two overpowering bloodlines together? They don't mix, so no childbirth. In all cases. He paused, letting it sink in. Ryuk's expression tightened. Except in my case. Exactly. For some reason, they didn't try to cancel each other out. They chose to coexist. The blue-scaled Ryuk nodded. But then, when you activated that technique, a third bloodline appeared. Ryuk's entire body froze on the throne. A third bloodline? Yes, the blue-scaled Ryuk confirmed, turning toward the crimson one. For a moment, Draco underwent a change. His consciousness was overtaken by something else, and his eyes turned frigid white, he explained. Ryuk turned to the red-scaled Ryuk, who suddenly grabbed his shirt and tore it open. There, slashed diagonally from his right shoulder down to his waist, was a deep scar running across his well-defined chest. He did this? Ryuk asked, shocked. The blue-scaled Ryuk shook his head. No, it wasn't Draco. It was the one who took over his consciousness. The second it gained control of Draco's body, it instantly tried to erase me. A bloodline trying to erase another only happens in the womb. That's when the stronger bloodline fights the weaker one, either wiping it out completely so the child inherits only one, or weakening it just enough so the child becomes a dual bloodline holder, but with an imbalance. For this new being to attack Draco, it means it's trying to eliminate him and take his place. That's why it makes no sense for your bloodline to be mutating now. The blue-scaled Ryuk finished, concern darkening his voice. Ryuk's mind spun, but it didn't take long before realization struck. He vividly remembered the system notification. Does host wish to see the skill panel of the new skill? The host must know there are. It probably tried to warn me, but I didn't care to read the rest before activating it, Ryuk thought. He turned to the blue-scaled Ryuk, who looked at him gravely. I don't know how you got your hands on a technique that tries to erase your original bloodlines, since all techniques you should inherit come from us. But whatever that technique is, it carries an overpowering bloodline stronger than either of us. It left a mark on Nullik in seconds, and overthrew my consciousness without a fight. If you activate it again, you won't just lose your Nullik bloodline. You'll most likely lose your Jade Dragon bloodline too, and have everything replaced by whatever that new bloodline is. A frown settled on Ryuk's face when he heard of the report. He knew well the only reason he could obtain a skill that could overpower even his original bloodline or not needing them to exist was because of the system and the special skill upgrade card. It was something he had kept secret and only him knew. But then it occurred to him, a dark realization. Ryuk's change in expression was instantly caught by both Ryuk before him. They looked at each other, then turned back to him. You can't be thinking of us getting us replaced by the abnormal bloodline, are you? He asked with caution, but then watched as Ryuk slightly leaned forward, his chin regally placed on his fist as he looked at both of them in interest before voicing out, "What if I am?" He confirmed, as they both looked at him in shock. "You're seriously considering that?" The red-scaled Ryuk asked, earning a shrug from him. A bloodline whose temporary appearance enabled it to hijack the consciousness of a Jade Dragon bloodline manifestation without so much as a fight, and land a strike strong enough to scar the manifestation of the Nullik bloodline. Now that I mention that, I think I only used the art for less than a minute, yet it was enough to cause all that damage. It makes me wonder what will happen if I leave it activated for about an hour, Ryuk said, chuckling a bit, watching the two Ryuks stir in their seats. That's a decision you'll come to regret, Draco muttered with unwavering certainty. But Ryuk only smiled, intrigued. Really? Because the way I see it, having you two replaced by a stronger bloodline with more power and potential sounds like an upgrade. That would mean more power, more potential for me, and I wouldn't have to deal with the headaches that come with being a Jade Dragon. Or a Null. Especially a Null, Ryuk said, placing his attention on the red-scaled Ryuk, though only for a fleeting moment. So, what do you say I'll regret again? He taunted. But Draco wasn't fazed at all. Firstly, with us gone, you'll lose your Null and Draconic skills and abilities, he said. But all he got was a shrug. I've lost my nanotech body before and with it all my abilities, but I came back stronger. Losing abilities doesn't scare me anymore. After losing your abilities, you lose your natural identity. Draco pressed on. Natural identity, huh? Ryuk mused. Yes. Whatever that bloodline is, it's not what you are. You're Ryuk Null, son of Faith Vorgith, the Null of Carnage. And you share a line with the daughter of Velzaraka. You're a Null and a Jade Dragon, and we're the manifestation of that. If you lose us both, you lose who you are, Draco said with confidence, yet watched as Ryuk slowly repeated, You're Ryuk Null, son of Faith Vorgith, the Null of Destruction, and share a line with the daughter of Velzaraka. He said in a tone that imitated Draco's, but the mockery in his words was as clear as day. You expect me to be proud, or in awe of that identity? Ryuk asked, staring at them like they were fools. Their mouths hung agape in disbelief. You guys make my identity sound so grand, But the truth is, it's a bit overrated. Actually, I take that back. It's not just a bit overrated. It's grossly overrated. What has being the son of Faith Vorgoth ever done for me, except nearly get me killed by the Null Calamities, and have me seen as a monster by the majority of people? You speak of me being a Jade Dragon and a Null as if it's worth something, but the brutal reality is, if I mention that name to any of my enemies who have their blade to my neck, no matter how grandly I declare I'm the son of Faith Vorgoth, or whatever origin my mother has, it won't stop that blade, not even for a second. So tell me, what exactly should I be proud of in being the fusion of a Null and a Jade Dragon? Or, oh, maybe because I'm some kind of rare anomaly? Because two overpowering bloodlines chose to coexist within me instead of destroying each other? But let's face it, what has this anomalyness brought me apart from pain? From the moment of birth, innocent dragons died trying to keep me alive. My uncle was reduced to ashes. He could have well defended himself if I had never existed, and that's an unrefutable truth I'll ever have to live with, he said, but Draco vochied out. Well, look on the bright side, he said, but got cut off by Ryuk. Bright side? Of course, yes, I got one of my severed limbs back. But then what? Now I have to go scour the universe trying to fetch the others. What brightness is there in having to go around the world to retrieve stolen body parts? Ryuk asked them, and all he got was silence. I killed the Null that killed my uncle. But then what? Does that stop the pain I feel in my chest when I remember that if he never passed his veins to me, if I never existed, then he would still be alive? Again, what peace is there in that? This is what being an anomaly has gotten me. Do you understand? Pain, guilt, and one fucked up situation after another. So don't lecture me about how mighty my bloodline is. I'm not proud of it. He said those words to them, each one ringing loud and clear in their minds. Then Ryuk inhaled deeply, calming the chaotic clouds in his head. His humor returned, and he asked, So, with identity out of the way, what else have I got to lose? Nothing, the Nullik Ryuk said before the blue-scaled one could speak. But then, Ryuk watched him rise to his feet, stepping right before him and bending to look him straight in the eyes. You can replace Draco with whatever that new consciousness is. And yes, it may get rid of me too. He whispered silently and just enough for both of them to hear clearly. But you'll never truly be rid of us. The second you fuse your second body part, it'll contain your original bloodline, and both of us will return, stronger than ever, and will fight the new consciousness with everything we have. It might succeed in killing us again, but it'll be weakened too. And guess who takes the biggest blow from that? He asked, but not waiting for Ryuk to reply. He completed, stretching his hand to Ryuk's face. You can defend yourself by saying you'll just avoid fusing with your other body parts. But at this point, I think it's time we all choose brutal honesty. You see, Ryuk? You see, Ryuk? Your search for your body parts isn't a conscious decision. It's a decision born from helplessness. If you don't go after the Null Calamities, they'll find you. And when they do, they'll take everything. That new family you think you have? It'll be snatched away, and you'll be forced to watch their brutal execution. You're not proud of your identity? Well, right now, it truly doesn't hold much value, but... He paused, staring Ryuk dead in the eye. It's not like you have any other choice but to embrace it, do you? What would turning away from it get you, if not the same death and suffering? He asked, watching as Ryuk simply chuckled humorously, though it didn't stop him from the Null Ryuk from continuing. Remember, Ryuk, you're not a man of choice. Replace us with that new bloodline, and maybe you'll laugh for now. But the sixth Null Calamity will find you at your peak, and you'll fight him and fuse with your body parts. We'll return and damage the new bloodline, weakening him, and weakening you. When you face the fifth calamity, you'll be even weaker than when you fought the sixth. And what will be waiting for you then is... You already know. Ryuk hummed silently. If you somehow manage to still defeat the fifth calamity, then you'll fuse your body with it, and we'll just be back once more," he said, this time chuckling. "And if we still don't defeat you, then we'll reappear when you get your part from the fourth calamity, and then the third, and the second. And when it comes to the first calamity, you'll never be able to defeat him without us consciously behind you, fighting alongside you. So, without us, your absolute fate is still death," he added, letting the words sink in. "So," Ryuk said, drawing their attention. "So, if I embrace this reality of being a Nullic Dragon, all that awaits me is one fucked up situation after another," he said, pausing to let it sink before continuing. "And if I decide to turn my back on it all, what still awaits me is the same death and suffering, huh?" he ended, chuckling darkly, and the Nullic Ryuk nodded. "Yes, that's what it means to be helpless. And without us in the equation, that suffering just doubles tenfold and seals your fate. You really think you can threaten us because of some stronger bloodline you know nothing about? One which you aren't even sure if it will try to aid you or destroy you. That's naive. And remember, your identity as the son of Thaithvorgeth is what gives your existence any importance at all." "Oh, really?" Ryuk asked, voice carrying newfound interest. "Yes. If you weren't born to such powerful parents and didn't possess us, if you weren't half Null and half Jade Dragon, then what would you be, if not nothing? The Null calamities chase you because you possess something important, and that importance is birthed from having us. Without that, you'd be nothing worth chasing or desiring," he said, and a throne materialized behind him as he reclined, copying Ryuk's posture. "So, what will it be, Ryuk?" he asked. Silence descended on the room as Ryuk's gaze slowly turned from the Nullic Dragon before him to Draco, and he saw, even the Jade Blue Dragon remained silent, something that was easy to interpret as a silent approval of Nullic's words. "What will it be?" Ryuk echoed, his lips mimicking the words, and the expressions of both Ryuks before him changed completely as the chairs beneath them crumbled to nothing. They took steps backward in fear. "What will it be?" Ryuk asked, exhaling deeply, before he reclined deeper into his seat. And then it rang out. That cursed word. "Activate Beyonder Dragon." The instant the words were spoken, Ryuk watched as Draco, who had been slowly backing off, instantly had the white path in his arm light up brilliantly, radiant with milky white power. And an instant later, Draco's eyes followed, lighting up with an incredibly bright milky white light. His claws reached for his own neck, but halfway they paused. His head slowly dropped, along with both arms. He remained standing there, helpless, but the Nullic Ryuk turned to him, whispering desperately, "You need to fight it, Draco. You can't let it overtake you." The hand swerved sideways with horrifying speed, slamming into the Nullic's face. He was blown away with terrifying force, crashing into the throne room's wall and shaking the sole place with the impact. For a second, the new Draco rose fully upright, his milky white eyes turning first to Ryuk, who remained unmoving on his throne. He stared at him emptily, before slowly turning his back to him. A being coated entirely in red flashed forward with speed, but it didn't head for the new Draco. It phased through the void, avoiding him, and an instant later, boom! Shockwaves tore through the throne room. The scene that followed was unbelievable. Resting just an inch from Ryuk's face was a crimson-scaled claw, 1 inch away from cleaving off his entire head. But it had been halted. Why? Because in its path was another claw. A white-colored scaled claw that had stopped the Nullic strike dead in its tracks. And that claw belonged to Draco. But the current Draco now had the last bit of his jade blue scales turned fully to white, making it impossible to tell just who was who. "Tsh." The Nullic Dragon clicked his tongue as his other claw swiped toward Draco's head with renewed speed. But then, boom! The white Draco blocked again, stopping it dead once more. A flex of strength surged between them as claws locked and eyes met. The ground beneath both feet cracked to pieces from the flex of power, a deep and wide crater quickly forming beneath them and extending for meters, But the struggle didn't last more than 5 seconds before one of them was heaved up his feet, skyward, and then, kaboom! Nullik was roughly smashed into the ground, the entire throne room shaking violently. He recoiled from the slam, and a sharp gasp of pain echoed through the room as he was blown erratically into the air. But it was silenced abruptly when White Draco's claw reached the side, a gleaming white light gathering over his sickle-like claws. And then he vanished. When next he appeared, he stood at the far end of the throne room, his body in the posture of a swift, deadly swipe. Ryuk watched as Draco descended back to the ground. Yet when he landed, the sound of something hitting the ground with thunderous force rang out. That object was Nullik's head. It bounced over and over until it came to a rest directly before Ryuk's feet, whose hand reached down, picking it up by the crimson hair and lifting it to his face. For a few seconds, there was nothing but shock and disbelief on Draco's face. A single slash of the claw had instantly defeated him. A bloodline that could defeat me. An overpowering dragon with just a slash? But the disbelief faded when he caught sight of Ryuk at the edge of his gaze. Slowly, a mocking grin spread across Nullik's lips. So, you made your final choice, huh? Choosing to get rid of us and seal your fate of certain death. Nullik said. I made my choice, Ryuk replied curtly, watching as the grin faded. Nullik realized something from the young man's expression. There was not the slightest ripple of regret in Ryuk's gaze. In fact, from how he looked, it was as if this was something he had planned to do all along. And somehow, something told Nullik that the appearance of the Beyonder Dragon was simply the opportunity he'd been waiting for. That realization made him ask, How long? How long have you been planning to get rid of us? He asked quietly. Ever since my battle with Zarkul, Ryuk said, voicing the thought that had long settled in his heart. Nullik chuckled. To think, even though we viewed your life like spectators, we still failed to suspect your twisted motive. Unthinkable, he muttered. But then, Ryuk watched as his head began to dissipate into red motes of light, showing that it had little time left. We'll be back, Ryuk. And when we return, we won't be friends. We'll be enemies, Nullik threatened. Yet no ripple of emotion stirred in Ryuk's eyes. They stared at each other, one fading into ashes. And just as Nullik completely vanished, his final words echoed. Now that I think about it, this is the first time you've made an important choice on your own, Ryuk. The first time you've become interesting. The words lingered, echoing through the throne room as Ryuk's hand opened, releasing the last of the crimson motes of light into the air. A full minute passed in silence as he sat, unmoving, his eyes closed. For a fleeting moment, memories flashed across his mind. His hands clenched into fists, and then slowly, they relaxed. I've made my choice, he thought, steeling his heart. Then he opened his eyes to see him standing before him. Draco, or rather who he hoped was Draco. But as Ryuk turned his head faintly, his gaze fell upon something else gripped in his left hand, the severed lower half of the now-deceased Nullik. He watched with interest as the new Draco lowered himself to the ground, crouching beside the body of Nullik. Both of his hands stretched outward, then began moving in circles, rolling, spinning, like someone trying to form a sphere from the air itself. But instead of a ball materializing, Ryuk watched as red motes began amassing from Draco's body. These red motes were none other than Nullik's bloodline essence. It broke apart and gathered, swirling around until there was no longer any trace of the left of him. Only a massive, rotating ball of motes of light remained, condensed and condensed further, until it became a red, egg-sized gem floating in the new Draco's palms. Then his second hand stretched forward, and from its depths, another gem appeared. It looked nearly identical to the Nullik gem, but instead of crimson red, it was jade blue. Ryuk understood what it was immediately. It was the bloodline motes of the Jade Dragon, Draco's essence. And its presence proved something. Draco no longer existed. The white-scaled entity before him now held both essences, floating gently in his hands. Ryuk watched as they dropped into its palms, and then he slowly pressed them together. There was an audible strain. Shockwaves continuously burst through the throne room from his palms. Ryuk watched him with intensity as the white light flared, the pressure rising. It persisted, continuing to press both palms together. And then, at last, the pulsating waves stilled. Both of the entity's hands were clasped, hiding what had formed within. Ryuk's gaze sharpened. Then, the white-scaled being finally turned to him. Eyes that once appeared distant and lost now stared directly into Ryuk's own. Then, it stretched out his clasped hands before Ryuk. And when they were just a few centimeters away from his face, he unfurled them. Within, Ryuk saw something he had never seen before. A gem, twice as small as the size of an egg. Yet what took Ryuk's breath away was its color. A shimmering purple. It pulsed with energy that felt more alive and conscious than any he had ever seen. Along its surfaces were glimmering runes. Ones that glowed with a bizarre power, something Ryuk recognized vaguely, something he had only crossed once. His thoughts spiraled, latching onto memory after memory. And then he realized it. The white entity before him had harvested the null motes from Nullik, and the blue motes from the Jade Dragon. So then, what happens when the essence of a null and a Jade Dragon are refined into one? Hurricane essence? What lay before him? He couldn't fully determine with certainty, but vividly, he could remember the words that he had once heard about it. When etheric energy and abyssal energy merge, it creates the birth of a unique special energy, the energy of Hurricane. And now it was before him. Whilst Ryuk had no idea whether the Hurricane essence would be the same as Hurricane energy, he could already feel the white motes of light that made up his body bouncing in joy, flaming all around him. It was like what the entity held out to him was something that had been denied and starved off from them for so long. Now that it was before him, they couldn't help but be excited about it. And that excitement transferred to Ryuk as well, whose hands reached out, taking hold of the essence gem. He looked at the entity. This new bloodline that wasn't his, but he saw no ripple in its eyes. There were no words between them, but they could both communicate, and right now it seemed to be telling Ryuk to take the essence. He had no idea why it required him so, but if his own cells wanted it, then perhaps there wasn't much to doubt. All or nothing, he thought to himself, stealing his mind. An instant later, Ryuk's mouth opened as he tilted his head upwards. And then, he swallowed the gem. It didn't need to be chewed at all. The second Ryuk felt the gem touch his tongue, it suddenly melted into something liquid. A taste he couldn't quite define, as it was neither sour nor sweet, filled him. But then, the sensation spread just a moment later. Ryuk's arms, resting on his lap, instantly froze in their tracks. His body turned rigid, his legs vibrating intensely. Like a broken disc, all of his actions came to a stop, but they glitched. His hands rose halfway to his head, then glitched again, raising and latching against both ears. Then it glitched once more as his upper body bent toward his legs. Once more he glitched, appearing halfway through the motion of roaring, purple blood streaming out of both his eyes. In his mouth, the white entity could see the vortex of purple that had revolved from the depths of his throat. And once more he glitched. This time, his eyes turned into black holes of full purple energy. When he glitched again, the white-scaled entity backed off from him, as Ryuk lay paused in motion. He had stood up from his throne, his hands reaching for the face of the white-scaled entity. His face stuck in a motion that the entity couldn't tell whether to interpret as pain or anger. But it took a couple of steps backward and remained on its feet, simply staring at Ryuk, who continued glitching in and out of existence. This was the physical perspective of things from the view of what stood closest to Ryuk. But to Ryuk himself, unravel. It was the only word that came close to defining what was happening to him. For one, the tether to his physical body was the first thing he felt unravel from him. His breath hitched from instinct, which he felt was a signal from his own body. Ever since, he had always wondered what it was. Something like his own body trying to communicate with him. It did, oftentimes. Like when he knew danger was near him, or things would get bad soon. like when he had Zarkul inching on his tail. His body warned him of it, and now his body was once more speaking to him. But what it spoke of now was the horrors of him allowing in something older and wilder than it could comprehend. It knew not what, but its fears were sent to Ryuk. But that was only for a moment. Just a moment, that was the least of what Ryuk needed to worry about. For the next moment, he felt consciousness ripped out from his own body, and like a spectator to a match, he watched as a singularity burst open in his core. Not outwards, but inward. He saw the cells of his flesh folding into themselves, his spine arching in its ear-slice curve shape, thrown in disarray, and watching his stomach get hollowed out by this explosion of purple. Every vein within him became a tunnel for raging purple lightning currents, and he could feel each nerve screaming out to him, not from pain, but from sheer overwhelm. He watched his lungs inhale nothing but violent purple pulses, and his heart stopped beating, and instead started pulsing in spirals. It resonated with unknown waves, and with each one, sent forth an arc of pulsing energy through him. Muscles were shredded and rewoven with each pulse, ligaments torn and reknitted, stronger. It's not breaking. The realization hit him. It's all being unraveled, and then rewoven, he concluded. But then, his mind came to the realization, as he found himself asking, what is it being rewoven into? That was the last of his thoughts, as his mind was fractured briefly after. He felt himself, he felt his body, an illusion which he now knew to be in the same place, but what he felt was contradictory. His sense of self, tethered to identity, the illusion of form, was yanked free and seemingly ground into a spiraling, infinite descent. You see, there was no ground, nor sky, nor air to breathe, nor even a substance or clue to grasp about this sensation. There was, in fact, only movement, realities being soared through. His original essence stretched thin across dimensions he could neither name nor anchor himself in. Every second resulted in thousands of visions colliding together. Burning worlds, frozen stars, the birth and death of galaxies. These were views that would be enough to break the minds of any mortal and render them insane, mumbling endlessly till the end of time. He was made to witness all of this in rapid succession, like a spectator, denied the right to form any opinions about them. A point came where he was lost, where he couldn't tell whether he was the one moving or if reality was spiraling around him. And this continued until he felt it all halt all of a sudden. Now he felt stable, regaining connection to something he didn't know, and in a realm he had never encountered. Where is this? He felt as though he was lying on his back, but there was no anchor beneath him. His limbs were stretched apart, flayed on all sides, but when he opened his eyes, revealing fractured irises with weaving purple existence constantly unraveling within them, something became obvious even to him. He felt control return, and he turned himself upright, managing to remain on his feet. The world around him was dark, but the concept of things was so twisted, he didn't know how dark it was at all. And in this darkness, where he was seemingly alone, he took a step forward. There was no sound. A crippling silence filled the air, and Ryuk didn't know whether to fear it or be cautious of it. His gaze roamed the darkness as he advanced, stepping on the empty space. Yet it was somehow solid enough to move him forward. He had not moved very far when he watched motes of blinking white and purple begin to slip out of the void of darkness. He watched them as he moved. One of them materialized before him, and a finger of his stretched out, popping it open like a bubble. But when it burst, it sent a minor explosion of light that drowned his senses for a time he couldn't keep count. When he opened his eyes again, the darkness of the void had half vanished, now lit with dancing motes of white and purple. But then, he looked in front of him, and there stood an entity with him in this space. It was cloaked in white, the cloak itself seemingly in tatters at its edges, yet they glistened with an aura he couldn't quite fathom. Its back was turned to him, and in its right hand was a black staff as tall as itself, with an egg-like gem implanted at the top. For a second, Ryuk paused in his steps, finding the gem more than familiar. Words and thoughts crossed his mind, concepts he couldn't quite understand. Still, there was nothing to point to the source of the gem or a reason why it seemed so familiar. Before he could think more of it, the voice rang out, clear, through the void of darkness. Eras. It began. The staff was raised up into the air and swerved to the side. Fluorescent purple gusts surged from the gem embedded in the staff, infiltrating the void, and soon enough, it began unraveling, giving space to images and footage. A fixed point in time where people asked different questions. Ryuk stepped closer, watching the footage around him begin to materialize in light. He saw a group of children running toward him. Yet when they came close and dipped into him, they weaved through like he didn't exist, their tingling, infectious laughter ringing through the air. But that was so quick to change, to the image of a spear stabbing forth straight through his heart. Once more, it passed through him as if he didn't exist, piercing into another being who was raised into the air by the attacker with the spear. A brutish roar of victory, the cries of war, sounds that would send any man's heart rippling with newfound courage. It changed again to another scene, as he walked into a crowd, where a man holding a large grimoire and wand stood, and down before him, cross-legged, were men and women of various ages, grimoires in their hands, seemingly glowing as they followed his words. A learning, infectious class that drew his curiosity to what was being taught. I was born in an era that sought to know more, the cloaked being said, swerving the staff once more as reality around Ryuk abruptly changed. A new set of people, a new set of aesthetics, a new set of scenes, a new set of worlds. An era where the people explored such concepts which would seem to most eras as abstract and of little meaning. What is destiny? What is fate? What is order? Hope, memory, desire, love, faith, power, and, seemingly most illustrious of all, eternity? I was born in an era that sought to know more of the multiverse, and verily, our curiosity took us farther than most eras will ever know. It said to him as once more, it swerved the staff. The distance between it and Ryuk lengthened by several thousands of meters, new dimensions and realities slipping in between. Each one distracted him, yet each at the same time absorbed into him like water into a sponge. But while it took us far enough, it couldn't help us solve the biggest question of all eras and timelines, the unraveling of eras. With the aid of curiosity, I have traveled far through timelines and their destructions. I have seen the mightiest of worlds come to ruin and fade away into obscurity, and the grandest kingdoms eventually become long-lost history. Worlds, timelines, eras unravel into nothing. And I know, verily, that new eras get birthed with the child era having lost something from the parent era. Something that made both eras, no matter how similar, never truly alike. The being said, its tone distant and slow. As Ryuk drew close enough, it raised its staff and slammed it onto the ground. For a second, the entire void of white and purple rippled like glass. The entire realm shifted into a new plateau of coexisting realms of various colors. From within each color, Ryuk felt a word coming into his heart. Energy. The word echoed through the entire realm. It is something ever constant through each era. Energy. It changes, like a stain left from each era onto the next. New energies are created, all lesser versions of energy from the parent eras. But I have come to recognize, among all these energies, one energy above all gets passed down, era to era. An ever-constant energy that might just be the key to unraveling the secret of the cosmos. An energy which I spent millennia studying, yet could never truly grasp, before my era came to an end. It said, its voice ringing through the world, loud and clear, as Ryuk floated backward. Slowly, he turned, but halted in his step when he found the cloaked presence just an inch before him. He raised his gaze and finally, he came eye to the entity that hid beneath the white cloak. An old man, long white beard, with tints of purple all around. Eyebrows so thick they covered half his face. A mustache that blended into the beard like wisps of cloud. Yet what captivated him the most were his eyes. Eyes of purple, within them, the unraveling of the cosmos. Worlds being burned and fading. Loopholes of time and dimension. They stared into Ryuk's very soul, captivating him into silence. And then, the word rang out through his mind, reverberating through Ryuk's existence. Hurricane energy is the ink upon which new eras are written. The only spell that can break this illusion called reality. Those who carry its curse are bound to one of two sure realities. The being said. His voice, though slow, made Ryuk's heart thump faster, even though he still failed to fully comprehend those words. Either they fail like the rest who have ever borne the curse, suffering the same fate as the erasure of the eras, or be the game-changer that ends this unending illusion. And now, you have also become one of those scarred by hurricane. The instant those words were spoken, it shot out with terrifying speed. The eyes of the sage before him shone with an incredibly bright light that pierced sinisterly into Ryuk's own. The ripple of power that emanated between both of them shook the entire realm, dispersing the various realities and energy realms present around them. Ryuk's mouth opened wide. His face stuck in excruciating pain as he floated off the ground. His eyes slitted into brilliant purple that shone brighter than the sun as the light from the sage eyes continued rushing straight into them. Quickly enough, a mark of purple runic tattoo began brushing itself onto Ryuk's neck, reaching downward and coating his body, and after what felt like a millennium passing, something happened all of a sudden. The energy rushing into Ryuk from the sage was seemingly severed by something. Something so fast no one saw it coming. And then, boom! A horrifying explosion that devoured both the sage and Ryuk, blowing the entire realm into non-existence. When his gaze snapped open, a ripple of purple burst throughout the entire soul space, filling everything for a while before it all came to a stop. When it receded, he found the sensation of sight returning to him, and then came the sensation of self. His eyes looked around, picking up on everything surrounding him. The first thing, the white-scaled entity that was slowly rising from the ground, having been blown away initially by the explosion of light from Ryuk's motion of opening his eyes. It sat up on its butt, shaking its head to clear away the stinging pain, but when it opened its eyes and looked up, it found a hand extended toward it. Blue milky white lights gazed into purple ones. Words unspoken. For a long moment, until the scaly white being finally extended its hand to the purplish tattoo-covered one, and both clenched together before the white-scaled entity was raised back to its feet. A nod of acknowledgement. Then Ryuk turned away from him, his eyes gazing into the surrounding soul space. It had all come together in his mind. His last memories of his fallout with his bloodline manifestations, of choosing to take the hurricane essence, the memories he witnessed, the cloaked being he met, the realization he was faced with, and the cloaked being's final words. All of this he could remember with such scary vividness that just thinking back on it made him feel as though his mind was being teleported right back to when it happened. But he diverted his attention to his surroundings. Right now, he was back in his soul place, but what stood before him wasn't familiar. His previous soul place was a throne room divided into two colors, blue and red, the colors of his dual bloodlines, and a singular throne at the center. But now, there was no such thing as a throne room. It was a familiar void, a void of darkness, with tiny motes of white and purple energy glinting all around like stars embedded in the void. Apart from these endless voids of white and purple dots of light, there was nothing else. Nothing. The soul space had completely changed. You did not expect it? The voice, crisp and clear, almost feminine in tone, spoke from behind him, prompting Ryuk to turn his head to the source. It came from none other than the new Draco, the manifestation of this new bloodline that he now possessed. Its face was plain, all emotions seemingly hidden, but to Ryuk, it was as clear as day when he looked into its eyes. Within them, he found something, a mix of curiosity and apprehension. It reminded him of the time Isha was born, and how she had given him that look. The look of curiosity from one newly born, just beginning to learn about the world. That alone had led Ryuk to many truths. But now he turned away again, taking a couple of steps forward. I did not expect it. He agreed, looking into the empty soul space. But he continued, "But I knew something was bound to change in their absence. This much I expected," he explained, pausing with a faint sigh before turning to the manifestation and uttering, "That form is not yours. What aim do you have in concealing your true form?" It was a sudden, bizarre question, one that didn't seem to relate to anything prior. Yet the scaled white Draco was visibly shaken, eyes rippling in disbelief. "You can see through my real form?" it asked, shaken. But all it received in return from Ryuk was silence, but that alone was enough answer. Eventually, it took a deep breath, pausing in its steps as its eyes shut closed, and Ryuk watched silently as the form of the being before him began to change. From a firmly muscled, towering, masculine-looking Draco, its form changed immediately into something entirely different. From a 3-meter-tall male to a 1-meter-tall female. Its face changed, giving way to an oval-shaped, elegant face. White draconic scales covered parts of its cheek. A gown of white draped around its body, the ends dragging onto the floor behind it. Its white hair extended and lengthened until it became a flowing, shimmering waterfall. And now Ryuk understood. This new bloodline was of a feminine nature. Surprisingly more pleasant to the eyes, Ryuk mused under his breath, but it was still easily picked up by her. "Your two original bloodlines just got reduced to nothing by me, and you find me pleasant to the eyes?" the girl asked, her tone now fully feminine, but her eyes knitted at Ryuk. She tried to decipher if he was bluffing with his unruffled aura. After all, while she might be a blank slate right now, guided only by instinct, but that same instinct told her that no one should remain this calm after what had just occurred. "You heard what they said," Ryuk replied, thoughts and memories co-swirling in his eyes. "They're never truly gone, and will be coming back soon." He could still hear the words of the null Ryuk, and they made sense. Ryuk's bloodline was held in large concentrated amounts in his other body parts. If he obtained any of his lost body parts, the bloodline concentration would increase, and they would more than likely return. "And when they come back, I'll get into another big fight with them," she added. "And while I'm confident I could kill them off a second time, that would make you weaker, and hence, get you killed, no." She watched as Ryuk turned to her, a smile crawling up his lips. "So, you really were in Draco's head all that time, listening to our conversations, even though, if I remember well, I didn't summon you out during those times, yet somehow you know everything we discussed." Ryuk narrowed his eyes, confirming to himself what he had long suspected. When he had those conversations with Draco and Nullik, he had felt there was a third presence, watching silently from within Draco's eyes. Somehow, even if Draco himself was oblivious to it, he could feel it. And now, his knowing smile told her all she needed to know. He was aware. Something she had tried to keep secret. The truth was, ever since Ryuk had activated Beyonder Dragon and she had gotten a chance to invade Draco's bloodline, due to their similar origin, and even when the skill was deactivated, she hadn't fully left. Instead, she had taken part of Draco's consciousness, and remained. Her aim was simple. "You were trying to see what relationship we all had together?" Ryuk probed. "Checking how safe or comfortable the home was before you decided to lodge in?" He watched the gleam in her eyes. "Is he reading my thoughts?" she thought, bewildered. "I wasn't checking how safe or comfortable it was," she responded, her voice clear and firm. "The ability and power of bloodline manifestations are based on two things. 1, their bloodline's power, and 2, how strong their relationship is with the one they inhabit. If either of these two things weaken, then their power weakens in turn, making them easier to be killed and replaced," she explained, revealing her true aim to Ryuk. "And it wasn't that difficult to understand. So when you slashed Nullik the first time, your attack only left a scar on his chest. You could have tried to defeat him then, but it would have been harder, and once I deactivated the art, you would have grown even weaker, probably making it impossible to overtake them both. So instead of continuing, you waited, hoping to see the relationship between me and them get sour," Ryuk said, finishing the rest of her thoughts aloud. "Once you saw it fracture, you knew it was your best chance. and you came out at the last second, instantly moving to end it all. Your claw attack, which only made a scar on Nullik's chest when you fought him previously, was enough to cleave off his head after our relationship soured. A sign that a sour relationship really makes a bloodline manifestation weaker and easier to kill. Seems like our skirmish enriched you the most, Ryuk added, but she scoffed at that. That's wrong. You were the one who got enriched the most, she said, drawing Ryuk's attention. Am I? Yes. That's interesting. How so? As you said previously, you were already hoping to get rid of both your bloodlines a long time ago. But you never acted on it. Firstly, most likely because, even though you might hate them, you still couldn't bring yourself to do it. Secondly, maybe because you were too weak to do it. And thirdly, because you feared that if you erased them, you would be left with no bloodline at all. Hence, falling in power. When they told you about me, and you saw I could hurt them, you realized something dark. That I was the one you needed. You unleashed me to kill them both. This is clear because you don't even know if I will listen to your commands or not. Yet you instantly continued to get rid of both of them without putting in much thought. You saw a chance, and you desperately took it. In the end, you got what you wanted. Both your bloodlines gone. And even though you have no idea whether I will be under your command or better or worse than your previous bloodlines, you at least got rid of the fear of having no bloodline at all. Your moves were risky, but you were the one who got the best of the fight. Her words were clear, and most of them were true. It led to a smile crossing Ryuk's face as he replied, You're not as naive as you look. You, of all people, should already know not to judge me by my looks by now, she said. After all, this cute little feminine form just got rid of two masculine-looking manifestations. Ryuk nodded. Fair point. So, what will it be then? Ryuk asked, turning as he walked forward toward her. Now that you've gotten rid of the original bloodlines and now possess my soul space for yourself, are you here to own the space, or to listen to every one of my whims? Or will you pretend to, like the others did, and fail? What exactly is your aim? She replied clearly and coldly. Firstly, you have no business in what my aim is. Oh! Her words took him by surprise, wondering the reason for such a change, but his expression didn't make it seem like he was that surprised at all. Sounds like hate, he replied, and she shrugged. Maybe it is. But most of all, it's caution, she said, stepping closer to Ryuk until she stood just a meter before him. When I stayed and hid within Draco, I did that not just to find a perfect opportunity where your relationships with each other soured, but to understand all about you, she said. Ryuk chuckled. And that 10-minute skirmish was enough to understand everything about me? He asked humorously. She shook her head with clarity. It's not enough to understand all about you, but enough to understand just enough. I've seen how your two bloodlines fell in my hands and got erased. To be fair, they didn't fall in my hands, they fell in yours. I didn't lay a finger on them, though, Ryuk defended. Exactly, she replied. And that's what makes you scary. You made them believe in you so much, they began to underestimate you. You made them believe they were in control with no chance of ever getting replaced. And you did this while they watched all your actions from your soul space. That's why they couldn't believe it when you told them you'd entertain the thought and didn't even realize how truly serious you were until I was right before them. And to top it off, they never suspected that you'd been planning this all along. I knew it when the red-haired one asked how long you'd been planning this, and you replied, after your fight with Zarkul. That alone tells me you're not as dumb as you act, she concluded. A curved grin spread across Ryuk's lips. And the fact that you replaced two bloodlines you were born with, who had been with you through your whole journey, and sat on the throne watching wide-eyed as they were executed one by one, is enough proof of your ruthlessness. My instincts tell me not many would be able to watch their own bloodline manifestations get erased, let alone be the one to set it up and watch as it happens. And not only that, but then go on to try and get along with the one who executed them, mere seconds after they were executed. Ryuk grinned even wider. I'm not stupid enough to think you appreciate my presence here. And neither am I stupid enough to believe I won't be replaced by a stronger bloodline the moment you get the chance. I'll never trust you and I'll never let you know my plans, or how much capability I hold, while making sure I learn all of yours. I will listen to none of your whims or commands, and I will never see you as an equal. I will be something above your traitorous and cunning existence, something you will never understand. So quit trying to get to know me or get me to trust you. It's a useless endeavor, she declared, nailing each word with precision. She watched in satisfaction as Ryuk's evil grin faded into a slight frown. But in a second, that changed into a brilliant smile. Sounds like you won't be fake at least, he said. And guessing by how you keep using the word instinct and your 1-meter-tall childlike appearance, I'm guessing you're more blank than filled and have a lower chance of hiding some grand, overly dark motive. Sounds good for me. Ryuk shrugged. And even if you do have a dark motive, I don't need to be 100% sure to get rid of you. I've got some experience with getting rid of bloodlines thingy after all, he added. Her eyes gleamed faintly because for her, his words hinted at something deeper. His reason for choosing to get rid of his original might not be tiredness or repeated betrayals or endless battles. There was suspicion in his tone, and how she understood it. He must have believed his original bloodlines had been hiding something from him, something that troubled him enough to consider replacing them, even with a bloodline not entirely on his side. Just what exactly is it? She thought, mystified, turning back to Ryuk, only to find him lying on the ground. Now, if you don't mind, I need to return to the physical. It's nice having you around, Ryuk said, then paused. What do you say your name again? He asked. She opened her lips as if to answer, but then scoffed mockingly. That is something you will never know. Miss, that is something you will never know, Ryuk added with a wave, his hand collapsing to the side. See you around, he said, his voice fading out. She watched blankly as his image slowly turned transparent, a sign his soul body had returned to the physical. Walking forward, she appeared before Ryuk. Going slowly on her knees, her scaly white hands slowly lowered to the side of his face, exactly to his ears. Her claws elongated in that moment, and just when it seemed she would dig into his head with both hands, she halted at the last moment. She hummed faintly, staring at the spot for a while before sitting down. Her image also faded like Ryuk's. Absolute silence and calm returned to the soul place. The first thing he picked up was the sound, and he recognized it. A faint, continuous hiss, like heat stretching across a surface. His ears flickered as he unconsciously turned toward the source, and then his eyes opened. What he saw was the gentle shimmer of sunlight filtering through the white glass panel. Another sound reached him, one whose meaning he couldn't immediately grasp, but when he turned to it, he recognized it. It was the wave-like pulse of sunlight shifting through the curtains and hitting the mattress. A sound of steadily gliding air flowing across the room. The light, rhythmic brushing of a cluster of leaves shifting and softly slapping against each other. Each sound was unnaturally clear, as if amplified through a powerful speaker. Unconsciously, Ryuk's hand moved, reaching for his ears. Why is my hearing so clear? The overly clear sensations were something he had never heard or known possible. And to top it all off, while these sensations all came in at the same time, they didn't clog his mind at all. If anything, they actually came together piece by piece, crafting a vivid, seamless image of the world around him in Ryuk's mind. That's new, he muttered to himself. But he didn't dwell on it much, instead turning to look at his surroundings. For one, the room around him was significantly different from what he was used to. It even made him wonder if he was still in Amamura. Everything around him was made of wood. What he sat on was a low wooden bed placed at the center of the room, built from golden-stained slats, its foam mattress more firm than soft. Beside the bedding sat a small, square table barely knee-high, and on either side of the table was a golden-colored futon. The floor, though golden-colored, was smooth wood, and the exit of the room was equipped not with a gate but with a sliding door, made of the same golden-colored wood. There were no paintings at all, neither pictures nor artifacts that gave a hint of where he was. Just a simple, wooden-focused room. But Ryuk didn't need to strain his eyes too much before he caught sight of the irregularities. Seemingly hidden perfectly in this otherwise ordinary-looking room were golden runes. They were drawn across the entire wooden flooring, across even the walls, and the same held for the ceilings, radiating soft motes of golden light. Ryuk's eyes turned to look at the wood he sat on, and he could see that the same golden runic lines were present. The same was true even with the mattress he used to cover himself. His hands moved, trailing down one of the runes, and his eyebrows knitted as he muttered, "Energy-restricting runes." These runes were usually what was placed in the chains binding prisoners and locking down their use of energy. And these same runes covered the entirety of where Ryuk was. Like a prisoner's house, except he wasn't handcuffed in chains or bonded to the bed. "I need to know where I am," he decided, moving to the edge of the bed and gently placing down his foot. But when he removed his legs from under the mattress where they had been previously hidden, he paused, bewildered at their sight. They seemed no different from how his previous legs looked, except whiter and smoother. But beyond such qualities, what captivated him was the tattoo that stretched across his legs. Coiling runic symbols that radiated invisible motes of shimmering purple energy into the space around him. Ryuk pulled up his trousers, but even when he reached his knee, he noticed the rune continued deeper and deeper up his legs, continuing until it covered the entirety of his skin. His back, hands, and even his neck weren't spared, but it wasn't thick enough that it covered his entire body and made his skin invisible. It was like a coiling thread instead, wrapping around the majority of his skin and letting loose seemingly harmless motes of purple light. Ryuk's hand moved to his forearms and found the back of them also covered in those runes, although his fingers were spared. He clenched and unclenched his hands, but surprisingly enough he felt nothing. The concept of strength or power wasn't felt by him, giving him the same feeling as if he possessed no weight at all. He rose to his feet, feeling his legs firm against the ground beneath him, and somehow, he could feel the motes of purple light around his legs. Tattoo seemed to soften the impact of his legs against the wooden ground, making his steps nearly silent. "Quite the interesting change," he muttered to himself as he took steps forward toward the wooden door, all while not making even the slightest of sounds. Gripping the edge of the door, he slid it open before fully stepping out. His hands moved after, faintly covering his face, as he felt some sting from the direct exposure to the sun. "This only happens if I've remained too long within a room. Just how much time has passed?" he thought to himself, fully stepping out of the door. On exit, he found himself standing in a garden of green, and looking all around him he saw towering mountains. But beyond them, he could still see the tips of the golden buildings, which he recognized to be the main architectural design of most Amamoran structures. The realization that he was still present in Amamora made him feel even lighter. Stepping further out, his gaze roamed around a bit. The room he had stepped in from was a solo one, the only one around the vicinity. But he need not look far when he turned to the side, and just about a kilometer away, there was another solo building, and surprisingly enough, Ryuk's ears picked up the sounds of steps moving toward that side. He stood silently, and soon enough the door was opened, and stepping out was an old-looking fallen. He was old, not because his hair was gray, no, they were golden. One of the brightest Ryuk had ever seen. Same for his eyes. But his face held wrinkles, and in his hands was a staff, which seemed more for support than as a weapon. When he stepped out, he wore his shoes, placed on a rack at the side, before turning his gaze straight to Ryuk. His lips moved, and though no words came out, Ryuk could hear it as clear as day. "You're awake, Ryuk," he said, a wizened, old smile appearing on his wrinkled face. Ryuk knew the last thing he could find funny right now was the face of a smiling fallen angel. He was starting to hate every single one of them, as most fallen angels in Amamora were insufferably arrogant, with more condescending smiles and gods' complexes than genuine smiles. But the one before him leaned towards the latter. It prompted Ryuk to take a step forward, walking toward the man, who also resumed walking toward him. "Let me take a wild guess," Ryuk said, when he was finally within hearing distance. "This place is a reclusive part of the Dominaire royal grounds?" Ryuk asked. The man chuckled. "Your guess is the truth," he confirmed. Ryuk nodded, then turned to the sky. Even though it looked open, he could still see the thin veil of ripple-like restricting rune energy that made flying out almost certainly impossible without having to break through the veil. "And if I may guess, you already discovered the restrictive formations set all around the area?" the man asked, earning a nod from Ryuk. "That too is right. I have to say, you possess a very good sensory ability. The number of people I've seen fly up to the sky, trying to escape this area, only to slam into the protective cover above. It's happened more than a couple of dozen times," he said, shaking his head. Ryuk got what he needed. "So, this acts like some sort of restrictive area to stop people from leaving? Like a cultivation prison of some sort? If so, why are you here then?" Ryuk asked as the man resumed walking, Ryuk leisurely following behind. "This place, to us Fallens, is called Koenka. It literally means fortress of restrained bonds. And its aim? Everyone knows it as the place where the family elders are imprisoned for a set duration of time," he explained as they continued through the glassy plain. Soon, they stopped before a path where violet-colored flowers grew in abundance. Ryuk watched as the old man raised his staff and tapped the floor beneath them 4 times. Immediately, the ground trembled a bit, and the patch of flooring where the violet grass grew shifted to the side. It revealed an entrance, stone steps leading deeper into the earth. "I'd like to show you something first, if you don't mind," he said before descending the underground path. Ryuk hummed faintly but didn't hesitate long before following him. "If it was something bad or destructive, he could have forced me down here while I was unconscious instead of waiting for me to wake up," he reasoned logically before stepping after the man. The path behind them shut, but instead of darkness, golden motes of light began illuminating the underground. The source was firefly-like creatures whose glow provided a soft, golden illumination. "So, you said this area is used to imprison family elders for some duration?" Ryuk asked, continuing the conversation. "Yes, that's correct. Sometimes even the elders misbehave and do inappropriate things. If they're not disciplined, they may go too far, turning bad and causing disorder in the family," he said. Ryuk's mind flashed to the memory of Elder Nagarasuk. Somehow, he was the first one to come to mind. "But the reason we're able to subdue such elders is due to the restrictive formation. Within this formation, anyone below the peak Apocrypha stage will feel as light as a feather, unable to muster even a single ounce of strength. Their energy is greatly restricted and locked down, and they're forced to stay here for as long as their crimes deem worthy," he explained. Ryuk's brows knit together, something the man seemed to notice even with his back turned. "Does that sound less harsh?" the old man asked with a humorous smile. Ryuk nodded. "It might be a punishment for ordinary people, but for such powerful cultivators?" he said, prompting a chuckle from the man. "You're more light-hearted than I expected. But what you may not know is, as much as being housed in the dark is frightening for the young, the feeling of being stuck in a place with no strength is worse for cultivators. Often more so than being whipped or beaten," he explained. "Those with great strength have lived their lives with the safety gained from power. Like a strong man with his muscles, as long as they feel energy flowing through their veins, they feel confident, safe, calm in most situations. They have something to rely on. Take that away, and you take away their confidence and safety. They become frantic, cautious, and scared of even the slightest sound. That's one of the worst feelings you can give to a strong cultivator like the elders. Something they will never want to experience a second time," he said with a dark chuckle, as realization crossed Ryuk's face. "And you? Are you an elder imprisoned here, too?" Ryuk asked, but the man shook his head. No, I'm not an elder. I'm just an old man who found comfort in such a quiet, reclusive place compared to the world outside," he explained, something Ryuk wasn't sure how to take. Even though the man radiated no aura, likely due to the restrictive runes that dampen all presence. The way he carried himself, how he gripped his staff, and how firmly his steps held the ground were all signs of one who was either strong or once strong. 10 seconds hadn't passed after his words when they arrived at a dead end. But he knew it wasn't truly a dead end. He could already hear the sounds of dangling chains from the other side of the wall, along with the heavy gurgling of liquid. As Ryuk had guessed, the man raised his staff and tapped 7 random spots on the wall. As he did so, he explained, "There are times when the sins of elders are so great that simply housing them without strength isn't punishment enough. In those cases, we raise the stakes a bit," the old man said with a smile as the stone door opened. When it did, Ryuk immediately felt a heat wave slam against his face. "Hot," he thought silently, but the old man continued without stopping, and he followed after him as both passed through the stone doorway, which soon shut closed behind them with a bang. What he found in the new area surprised him and was starkly different from everything he had encountered in this place so far. The world before Ryuk could be described with one word: hell. Not the literal hell those scrapped hunters used to curse themselves with, because Ryuk knew, if that hell was this, they wouldn't wish it upon themselves. This hell was instead hell because everywhere Ryuk looked was covered in flaming, red, bubbling lava. But what was worse? The steam from the lava was so hot, he could hear the lava-resistant rocks burning away, with entire mountains collapsing into the molten flow. He watched them instantly reduce to ashes, before they even entered the lava at all. His eyes roamed around, and he found that the space where he and the man stood was covered by a protective barrier, which was probably being used to shield the heat of the lava from reaching them. Yet, Ryuk could still feel the faint burn on his skin. As for how hot the lava would be, he had not the slightest idea, but what truly numbed him were the Fallens who were hung right above the lava. Yes, Fallens. They were held by incredibly thick black chains that came from the mountains all around. But it didn't wrap around them. Instead, it tore through their palms, winding into the other side. The same for their legs, which are as far away as possible. And to top it all off, they were completely naked. Their bodies had long turned charcoal black, and he could see as their bodies quivered, trying to flinch in agony. But they were held so wide open by the chains that they could not move. Their mouths opened wide in a howl, but the sound didn't reach him, as if their voices had long dried out from screams. 2 of them, Ryuk recognized among the bound ones. "Is that?" he asked, pointing at one of the men, and the old man nodded. "Yes, that is him. Elder Nagarasuk, a 101-year-old serving elder of the Dominaire family," he said, as Ryuk's eyes wrinkled in annoyance. His face, though blackened and almost mashed, was still recognizable to Ryuk, and the sight of him made his blood boil. But when he saw the state he was in, his anger cooled off. His current state was terrible enough. Around him were 4 more people, but Ryuk only recognized a second one among them. That was the one from which Ryuk had picked up the ploy that they were trying to end him, the one who had said, "Nogara will be killing him off now anyway. There's no issue even if he knows the secret right now. It's too late." He was also tied up here in chains, bearing the same agony as Elder Nogara. "Why are they all here?" Ryuk asked the old man, who rested both hands on the staff, eyeing the elders with an emotionless gaze. Each of them had a role in a decision that hadn't been made by the family. Their decision, which was believing you're unworthy of being in a relationship with the new chosen one, and then deciding to end that relationship in one way or another. Normally, they would have only been imprisoned for a couple of months for daring to entertain such thoughts, but they took it as far as trying to end you in broad daylight for it. Not only did they risk making a great enemy for the Dominaire family, they also tarnished the family name, giving it the wrong impression while also earning the ridicule that has spread ever since the fight you had with Elder Nogara. The man explained, something that surprised Ryuk, but not just a bit. For that reason, 3 of the elders will remain here and only be released after 3 months. One of them will remain here for 6 months. And as for Nogara himself, the family has arraigned him to stay here for 5 years. but because of interference from the new chosen one herself, his sentence was reduced to just 2 years. Quite lucky, isn't he? The elder said to Ryuk, chuckling amusingly. But Ryuk didn't find it that funny. They were all literally being roasted alive and naked. But he didn't say a word. Somehow he felt they deserved it. As if it had been up to him, he would have killed them instead. He almost killed Nogara if not for Morgana's interference, so he was at least lucky to just be getting burned for 2 years instead of outright losing his life. The heat is getting unbearable for my old skin. Come, let's go back up, the man said to Ryuk as they both headed back up. When they got back up, the floor closed behind them, hiding the underground prison. Ryuk finally voiced out, "As much as I want to believe they're being punished for what they've done, a part of me suspects you're doing this only to curry favor with me," Ryuk said, watching as the man smiled brilliantly. "I'm glad you felt that way and brought it up. I appreciate the direct old ways compared to the sneaky ways of the new ones. And to be honest, the elders are being punished majorly because they ridiculed the family name. The family has become the butt of jokes right within Amamura due to word that the elders of the family were all helpless against one who is just an archguard," he explained, and Ryuk thought, as expected. Ancient families like this usually care more about their name and reputation than upholding justice at all, so he wasn't too surprised. Secondly, the decision for them to be imprisoned here is signed off by the new chosen herself. Morgana signed it? Ryuk asked, genuinely surprised. She did, although I doubt she knew they wouldn't just be imprisoned in some reclusive area, but instead get burned. But still, only on her command were their punishments issued. And lastly, this is being done for you, the man said, and Ryuk watched as the old man slid to one knee, bowing down to him. As the third Grand Elder of the Dominaire family, I tender forward a plea for you to please forgive the wrongdoings and harm that has been caused to you through the reckless behavior of some of the elders. The old man said it, but Ryuk could not bear to see such an old man kneel for him. He rushed up and bolted to him before his second knee could reach the ground. But the man suddenly grew heavy, as Ryuk felt the resistance weighing on him. He said, "If you do not say you forgive them, I forgive them," Ryuk said firmly, but the old man hesitated still. "I have forgiven them, now please, stand to your feet. I am glad I could make things right with you," the old man said with a smile, and Ryuk gave a reassuring smile. For once, he had been satisfied with how justice was upheld. Trying to force Morgane into a new relationship and deeming her relationship with him as insignificant was unfair and disrespectful. Not just to him, but to Morgane, and to anyone who was in a relationship. A relationship is a conscious decision between two people, and so far, neither has forced the other into it. It shouldn't make sense to try and separate them simply because one is now perceived to have more value than the other. He was glad the Dominaire family recognized this. Unlike most situations where wrongdoers were said to be punished, only to later escape accountability because of their power, this time was different. This was the first time he witnessed powerful people being punished. Even Apocrypha stage beings who held the position of elders still couldn't have their powers spare them from punishment by the Dominaire family, and that was enough to improve the image of the family in his eyes. But most importantly, it was enough to let him let go of the skirmish. "If you're wondering why you're held here," the man said as Ryuk raised his gaze to glance at the barrier, "it's not because you're held here for punishment," he said, drawing his attention. "It is because after you became unconscious, the Chosen One took you to the family hospital. But then, incredible energy waves began rippling off your body uncontrollably, bringing half-ruin to the entire building. You became untouchable, your aura growing higher and higher and much worse for anyone to approach. That was what prompted me to intervene, bringing you here and borrowing the restriction formation powers to lower your spilling aura. As you can see, it worked very well," the man said with a smile, his gaze faintly turning to the various purplish runic tattoos on Ryuk's arms. "Those tattoos of yours hold great power," he said, not bluffing but simply stating a simple truth. Ryuk turned his gaze to the runes, too. He could feel power within them, not brute force since he also felt lighter than a leaf right now. He just felt them, in ways his mind couldn't wrap around and therefore found no words for. If anyone got hurt during the aura explosion in the hospital building, I'll take responsibility for it, he said. But the man waved him off. That's nothing to be worried about. None were killed, and those who got hurt should already be back to their various lives now. It's been a month after all, he said with a wave. A month, huh? That's quite some time, he thought, and the Grand Elder's eyes gleamed with light, watching as Ryuk's feet silently left the ground, floating up into the sky. He watched him from below silently, a small smile grazing his lips. Ryuk didn't need to try and fly, he just needed to want it, and a moment later he felt the anchor of his legs, his tattoos change. From trying to anchor him to the ground, it instead shifts to try and anchor to the surrounding space. And like that, he was raised up, anchored to the space around him. As he rose higher and higher, his gaze lifted, eyes fixed on the restrictive cover above. When he reached just a meter beneath it, his hands slowly extended upward, gently touching its surface. When it did, a ripple spread over the barrier, and for a second, it became visible. Golden particles, drifting here and there, symbols eternally interlocking together. Ryuk noticed as the purple motes of light coming from the tattoo on the back of his palms started to flutter more and more out of the runic lines and float toward the barrier. They lingered among the golden particles under Ryuk's watchful gaze, and before long, their purple hue began to shift, slowly turning to gold. When all the motes were changed to golden, they returned to Ryuk's tattoos, and for a second, tattoos all around his body changed. From their purplish color, they imitated the golden motes of light that were the same as the restrictive rune above him, and with just a push, Ryuk found himself phasing through the restrictive cover. A little more rising and he was completely out of the barrier, his gaze turning to look at the elder beneath him, whose eyes flashed with clear surprise and even disbelief. To think he broke through the Zenrak formation with just a touch of his palms. He truly is at the Exignis stage, but for one so young. He thought silently to himself, as Ryuk watched two wings made of golden essence appear behind the man, and he flapped once. When he reappeared, he was right beside Ryuk. If I can guess, you're worried about how your family is doing, the Grand Elder said, reading Ryuk's unvoiced worry with a guess. Then, come with me, he ushered, turning towards a direction and continuing, followed by Ryuk. It was a lone Amamoran building, golden in color like the rest. It had a pretty vast green grassland, standing alone in the widespread settlement before him. Before this structure, he appeared. He didn't need to knock at all, as even from so far away, he could hear it all. The shuffling of papers, the hushed whispers of fingers tapping on holographs in the air, and the tapping of feet on the gem-glass flooring. Ryuk turned to the sky, watching the elder hidden amongst the clouds, who gave him a nod of support. It was the final straw he needed to break through the various thoughts in his head, the thoughts of his own insecurity, of now being too different to be accepted, but he chased it all away, stepping through the garden. The various cacophony of sounds continued, even as he reached the door. His hands reached for the knob at the side, but eventually it got the best of him as his hand recoiled, turning to a fist, and then, when he knocked, the cacophony of sounds faintly ceased, and then, approaching footsteps, the sound of hands clenching hard against the knob, a faint pause of suspicion, and then, the door creaked open slowly, a face bubbling from the side. "Who are you?" The voice spoke out, looking at him with caution and firmness. But then, the familiar smile appeared, as Ryuk scratched the back of his hair. "Do you not remember me anymore, old Jack?" he asked, watching as the door was fully opened up, and old Jack fully stepped out, shock and disbelief written over his face. His lips tried to move, to mutter a couple of words. You, eyes. All that came was a bunch of incoherent words, but all were silenced, as the man took a step forward, appearing before Ryuk and pulling him into a deep manly hug. "I could not forget that voice even if I wished," he said, and a moment later, a new presence appeared behind him, alerted by the exchange. It was Mrs. Linnea, the half-fallen one, and she looked at him, first a bit lost, but quickly enough, disbelief filled her as she stepped forth. her hands wrapping around them both. Ryuk, she called out, a smile of relief spreading across her lips. Ryuk felt one forming on his own as well. He felt warm, but it wasn't from the outside. It was within. A warmth quite unlike what he was used to. It's good to be back, he whispered, the embrace holding for as long as half a minute, before he was ushered into the room. In the clouds, a figure saw all of this, none other than the Grand Elder, whose eyes of caution slowly faded, giving way to a gleam of realization, a small smile on his lips. He's the youngest person I have ever met with so much potential. Even with an incomplete soul and missing true body organs, he possesses a great slumbering power, one that could be difficult to constrain if unleashed, he mused silently to himself. But his people, they are the anchor that binds this power, giving it a reason and keeping it constrained. His family is more important than we all thought and must now be protected at all costs. You know, my stomach cannot handle all of this alone, Ryuk said, looking with a watering mouth at the entire table before him. It was filled to the brim with everything a hungry man could ask for, but too much for him. Please, Ryuk, act more like that golden goof than the dickhead, okay? Mrs. Linnea teased, faintly eyeing old Jack, who could only roll his eyes helplessly. I just had to be cursed with that name for all eternity, huh? Old Jack thought helplessly, drawing a seat from the side. Fine then, I'll join in, he said, his mouth unconsciously watering from the dish. Displaying no courtesy, he picked up the cutlery at his side, fork and knife in hand, and dove right in. Mrs. Linnea took her seat, but she didn't seem to possess much appetite, instead looking at him, an action that invoked his nervousness. But when he looked into her eyes, her relieved expression held great worry in them. Did I worry you both so much? Ryuk muttered, and old Jack answered after taking a good bite. The food was sweeter than he expected, and the taste lingered pleasantly on his tongue. Did you really make us worried? He asked, but then continued. Well, I don't know. We were at home, both I and Linnea, navigating through work panels, and my bonehead getting many rejected applications, and then, all of a sudden, it was the sound of a phone call. I thought it must be heaven finally seeing my hard work. But guess what came through the other side? Old Jack rhetorically asked, before imitating a familiar voice. Ryuk, it's Ryuk. He's not breathing. Of course, it was Morgaine's voice he imitated, although Ryuk couldn't believe his ears when he heard he wasn't breathing. If that really happened, it was bad news, and at a bad time too. What was worse, Mrs. Linnea said, is arriving at the hospital building only to find its top having been blown off, and a wave of aura that knocked everyone in the hospital out and stopped anyone from being 200 meters close to you. Now, not only were you dying, but you were also releasing a wave of power that kept anyone from getting near you. We had no idea whether you were alive or dead, and no one who could help could even approach, she explained, her voice calmer and more serious than old Jack's. Eventually, a Grand Elder of the family showed up, the only one who could help. Morgaine trusted him, so we agreed for you to be taken, but to be honest, we were just going with the risk that he would at least be able to save you from what we feared to be certain death, while we wouldn't be able to do anything. She completed as silence blanketed the room. I'm sorry for putting you through so much, Ryuk said softly, pausing mid-meal. But before he could say more, Mrs. Linnea gently took his hand and replied. We're just glad that you're okay, she said, watching as he smiled. But then, light crisscrossed in her eyes when she saw Ryuk's hand, too, began turning golden from the point of contact. The golden color continued to spread, covering his entire body. Even the tattoos on his exposed neck shifted, their hues turning to gold, the same golden as the half-fallen one. She took her hand from his, watching the golden color persist for about 5 seconds, before returning to its shimmering purple. But then she held him once more, only for the golden particles to quickly spread all around again. She turned to Ryuk in confusion. Even if you ask me, I can't say what they are because I have no idea how I even got them, Ryuk said, before they could ask him about the tattoos. It's like they're adapting to the closest energy source around you. When I placed my hand, Mrs. Linnea said, holding on to him, they adapt my energy, she said, watching as Ryuk's tattoo once more turned gold. And when I remove my hands, they return to their normal purple. An adaptive type of energy? I guess that's a good way to put it, Ryuk replied, agreeing with her words. He could vividly remember when he had touched the barrier. The tattoo had also imitated the same energy oozing from the barrier, and once it became one with it, it enabled him to slip through easily. Perhaps, hurricane energy was an adaptive energy. If that were true, then things would make more sense. I'm guessing you haven't seen yourself in a mirror? Old Jack said from the side, stuffing a chunk of meat into his mouth, as he looked at Ryuk, whose hands reached to his face. But then, a beam of golden light emerged from Mrs. Linnea's eyes, and soon enough, a panel appeared before Ryuk. In an instant, it shifted into a camera, revealing Ryuk's reflection, and the changes were more surprising than he expected. His face had changed significantly, a soft, V-shaped structure with a smoother jawline than he remembered. His cheekbones were balanced, not sharp, but subtly defined, giving him a look that radiated youth and a quiet, celestial grace. His eyes were large, a breathtaking shimmer of swirling purple, enough to captivate even him, and he stared for 3 straight seconds. His skin was still pale in complexion, but far more flawless and smooth than he remembered. In fact, it was so refined, it almost seemed as if a layer of divinely arranged scales lay just beneath the surface. At first glance, he could guess this was the effect of possessing the Beyonder dragon genes, which was a feminine bloodline, but while it gave him more feminine flawlessness, it also didn't make him resemble a female. Too elegant to look like a full-grown man, but not so much that he looked like a woman. Instead, a perfect blend of both features. That's quite the change, Ryuk mused quietly. Now it makes more sense why the oldie couldn't remember me until I spoke. For a second, I thought he grew too old and lost his memories. He teased, turning to old Jack, who coughed helplessly. Don't get me started again, bloody mutt. Ryuk grinned before turning to eat, but his gaze caught Mrs. Linnea's expression, which, though neutral, was faintly furrowed. What's wrong? He asked, as she turned to him, blinking innocently. But then, Ryuk's expression shifted, growing more certain. You look disturbed by something, he said. Mrs. Linnea said, pausing, but old Jack voiced out instead. We all are disturbed, Ryuk, he said, earning Ryuk's attention. You've been going through a lot recently, you know? Zoning out frequently, he explained. But I mentioned that was due to needing to be in my other body, remember? He said softly, to which he nodded. True, but, watching someone sleep is only normal at night. If you catch them sleeping in the early morning, sure, they're probably just tired. But when you see them sleeping for days, sometimes even weeks, it starts to get worrying, especially when you know they don't need sleep like ordinary humans, he explained. That truly made some sense, but it also meant they just had to get used to it. And you've also been unstable, ever since your fight with Zarkul, falling into slumber for 4 months straight. And during your slumber, the sky was always changing. Seeing you blow up in that hospital was a massive sign of instability, and all we know from Morgaine is that you seemed to activate a technique, and then just fell into slumber. That, of course, doesn't explain much, old Jack said, to which Ryuk silently hummed. As much as we try to make sure being with us feels like home, we're also being careful not to go too far and ask things you're not comfortable sharing, Mrs. Linnea said, continuing, but week-long slumberings, blowing up with energy now and then, and various phenomena. You don't come across this every day, much less by a single person. It really makes us worry about your health, and by us, I mean Morgaine too, she said as silence settled around the table. Ryuk heaved silently, before he grabbed his knife and resumed eating. My bloodline is unstable, he explained. That's reasonably true. When some nulls were captured for experimentation on Endearth, we discovered that abyssal energy is a very unstable energy. Any minor misgauge and it blows up from within them, Mrs. Linnea said, But then Ryuk paused. Have you both never wondered why, even though I claim to be a null, I'm humanoid and white in complexion? He asked, and watched as they slowly nodded. It has crossed my mind once, Old Jack agreed. But they never asked him, probably due to fear of crossing a boundary. To them, Ryuk didn't think he needed to hide who he is, or at least who he was. I'm a null in that I have nullic blood flowing through my veins, he began, watching them nod, attentive. But I'm a hybrid, half null and half jade dragon. Half jade dragon? Old Jack said, stunned, but Ryuk nodded. It's the truth. Also, this body of mine that you see, he said, watching as they turned silent. It's not real. It's a mix of nanotech, like you may have already realized, and some real part of me, he explained. Old Jack's eyes gleamed in realization. Of course, he knew Ryuk was robotic ever since he regenerated a tech-enhanced arm after it was severed. It made Old Jack realize that while Ryuk looked human, there was a great chance he wasn't. And he never mentioned it, nor did he know much about it, since the one person he could have asked, Bob, Ryuk's uncle, was already gone by the time he realized it. Apart from my heart, lungs, and brain, everything else you see is nanomachine, gained from an Anunnaki model. It's not real. What happened to the other body parts? Did you get in an accident? Mrs. Linnea asked worriedly. It wasn't an accident. My body was torn into 7 parts and distributed among my people. In an age I can't fully remember, he said. Mrs. Linnea's hand flew to her mouth to hide her shock, but her wide, stunned eyes gave her away. When they ripped me into 7 parts, they shared it amongst 7 nulls. These nulls have a special name, calamities. There are a total of 7 of them, and the 7th one was Zarkul, whom I faced on Endearth, Ryuk explained, realization hitting Old Jack, though he refrained from interrupting. When I faced Zarkul and killed him, I assimilated with him, my original body part that was in him. So, that's why you were in slumber for those 4 months after your fight with Zarkul? Mrs. Linnea asked, and he nodded. Yes, I was refusing with one of my body parts. My skeletal system, to be exact. It's the reason for the slumber and all the weird phenomena, he explained, and they inhaled. Now, things were clearer, and some of their doubts were dispersed. My main body is on a journey to travel to the upper realm, to retrieve the remaining 6 body parts that I'm missing. Without those parts, I will never be whole, and that's why I need to get them all back. It's the reason I can't always be in Amamura, he said, and it made Linnea finally understand. She had always wondered why he never tried to start a new life here. Ryuk often zoned out now and then, slipping away to his main body, but she never really knew what he was doing during those moments. She often wondered whether what he was chasing was truly worth it, or if he was simply avoiding the chance to start anew in this world. But now she had her answer, and it made sense. She knew well that if she were in his shoes, it would only make sense to go out searching for them with the hope of getting them back. When I collapsed and was rushed to the hospital by Morgaine, he said, bringing them back. It was truly because I activated a technique, like she said, but the technique I activated led to the creation of a 3rd bloodline within me. A 3rd bloodline? Old Jack asked, confused. Yes, and that 3rd bloodline turned into a bloodline manifestation that got rid of my 2 original bloodline manifestations, he explained. Wait, a bloodline you got from activating a technique? Got rid? Like destroyed? Your null and draconic bloodlines? He asked, hoping to be corrected. But all he got was a nod from Ryuk. Yes, right now, I no longer have even a single drop of null bloodline or jade dragon bloodline within me, he said. Old Jack's jaw seemed to have lost its screw, hanging onto the table, while Mrs. Linnea's eyes were more focused, thoughts flickering in them before she asked. So, right now you're no longer a null, right? What made me a null, which is the blood in my veins, is now gone, replaced by another, he said. What other? Do you know what this other bloodline is? If you don't mind me asking, of course, she said, watching as he softly shook his head. It's fine. The new bloodline, I don't know much about it. But the name, I believe, is called Beyonder Dragon. Beyonder Dragon, Mrs. Linnea muttered repeatedly, seemingly filtering through the word in her head as if searching for something. But in the end, she got no clue at all. I've never heard of such a race. Was that what caused the huge explosion in the hospital? She asked with more clarity, but he shook his head. No, that wasn't what caused the explosion. When the Beyonder Dragon manifestation slaughtered both my Null and Jade Dragon manifestations, it transformed their energy motes into gems, and then fused them together. There's an ancient saying, when apex energy and abyssal energy fuse together in harmony, a new energy, unique and extraordinary, is born. That energy is referred to as hurricane energy. Hurricane energy, she repeated with a whisper. The fusion of my two bloodline manifestations by the Beyonder Dragon bloodline led to the creation of a hurricane energy gem, which I swallowed. When I swallowed it, it tried to fuse with me. That fusion was what must have led to the explosion of energy in the hospital. And furthermore, it's the same energy you see in these tattoos. He added, and they turned to his tattoos. Now it made more sense than ever. I always felt this tattoo on you wasn't radiating apex or abyssal energy. Now it makes more sense. So this is hurricane energy? She asked, and he nodded. That's correct, he said, but his eyes lit with seriousness as he continued. I'm telling you all this because if I just say, I'm fine, or I'll be fine, or I won't explode anymore. He paused, noticing their eyes turning to him. It would be a lie, as I have no idea what hurricane energy can fully do or is capable of, nor do I know all about this new blood flowing in me. But I think having a single bloodline in you should technically be more stable than having two opposing bloodlines, and this hurricane energy of mine seems stable enough. That is the most promise I can make about the future. I'll figure everything out eventually, but for now, all I'm doing is grappling in the dark with not high enough guarantee I won't blow up with a bang tomorrow, he explained. Old Jack chuckled but choked midway when he got a stare from Mrs. Linnea. Now, I feel even more at rest at what you said. There might be no guarantee, true, but at least we know it's not due to you being unhealthy, or a cultivation mishap, or a curse you got from Zarkul that is slowly corrupting you, she said, hypotheses that made a strange expression appear on Ryuk's face. Most of those are the ideas of Jack, by the way, she added with a side glance at Jack, who opened his lips to defend himself, only to quiet down when her stare turned from a side-eye glance to a full-on mean glare. TCH, I'm being bullied unfairly. Whatever this new energy and this new bloodline is, I'm sure you will find a way to understand it. If you did, then a little blowing up and experimenting here and there will be a price worth paying for it, she said, comforting him. I'll do my best to minimize the damage as much as I can. So, you mentioned going through job panels and a lot of rejected applications? Could anyone be looking for a job? Ryuk asked, glancing around the room. Mrs. Linnea turned her gaze toward old Jack and slowly said, Yes. And let me guess. It's the oldie struggling to get a job, of course. Because I know my Mrs. Linnea, and I know she's too knowledgeable to have even one of her application letters rejected, he said as Mrs. Linnea giggled, looking at her husband, whose face had completely turned red. Wow, Ryuk. Raising one up just to let your good old buddy down, Jack said, getting a grinning scoff from Ryuk. If you mean a good, greedy old bastard, then maybe you're more correct. But I just think you got too influenced by grade E, and with Amamura's standards you became obsolete, he said, watching old Jack fume. Wow, I feel like you're just having a good laugh. But that pretty much nailed it, Mrs. Linnea said, and Ryuk blinked. Oh, he said, and she explained more. Jackie here tries to get a job, but the majority of jobs require some sort of proof of efficiency, which the oldie doesn't have, and therefore his applications get refused. As for power-focused jobs, he was refused too. While just being a Fallen is powerful back on End-Earth, it doesn't seem to be enough for security posts or interdimensional jobs here. The end conclusion? Oldie here has become obsolete. I thought it was ridiculous, but you somehow guessed it right. Is grade E really that backwater? She asked, looking between Ryuk and her husband. The phase of being in grade E was Ryuk's time of growth and childhood. He'd become part of her family, and when old Jack disappeared, It seemed he had also gone to Grade East for close to 50 years. More time than she had ever spent with him. She knew an important phase of life had happened in both their lives in Grade E. Her cluelessness about it all made her feel like there was a barrier she'd never be able to cross. But if she did, it would enable her to truly understand both men even better. It also created the question, just how backwater was Grade E? It's a good place, though, old Jack defended. I enjoyed being so free-hearted, smoking my cigarettes all day long, and wearing a blindfold, looking like a true old-town ranger. Ah, true manly life, old Jack said, a dreamy mist in his eyes as he remembered the good old days. But then he snapped out of it. But of course, it doesn't compare to even a single day I spend with you here, my love, he quickly added. Ryuk chuckled when he saw Mrs. Linnea's expression narrowing. Her eyes squinting at him before she humphed, grabbed some empty plates, and stormed out of the dining room with another scoff. Someone slipped up, Ryuk said, chuckling with laughter as he looked at old Jack, who stared at where his wife had disappeared before drawing his chair closer to Ryuk, coming within 5 inches beside him. It's a hard life here, Ryuk. I feel like I'll be dying soon eventually. How much I miss Grade E, he lamented. Ryuk rolled his eyes. Of course, old man. The good old days where you avoided your responsibilities and became a kid once more, he said, and old Jack sighed. Of course, that. I know. But really, you're young, Ryuk. You're at that perfect time, your adventurous age. Believe me, go wilder. Go on the most ridiculous ruin mission ever. Visit the most dangerous of worlds, and fight in them. Make powerful nemeses and friends, and smoke a cigarette too. Enjoy your young years, because once it's gone, and the responsibility phase comes, tisk, he ended, clicking his tongue as his fork picked into the 2 last meat slices on the table. He stuffed one down his throat, but opened an eye just in time to see Ryuk slyly slide off the second piece before stuffing it into his own mouth. You can't steal from me with some quotes, oldie, Ryuk said, as old Jack rolled his eyes. He had tried to distract Ryuk with wise words while slowly securing the last meat for himself, but Ryuk was faster and had saved himself the final slice. Tsk, you're too smart. It's weird. Everyone seems so smart nowadays, he said. Ryuk asked, so you eventually got the job? It's been a month, after all. Old Jack nodded. Yeah, I got one last week. I'll be resuming tomorrow, Monday, he said with a wave, stuffing down some vegetables. I'm curious. What's the job? Ryuk asked. Arranging books. In the biggest library in Iritoyu Venue, he said with half pride and half disappointment. That's a good one for a once mighty ranger, Ryuk commented. Linnea found it for me. After I couldn't get one even after endlessly typing words for 21 days and getting rejected over and over, he added. It's a good one, Ryuk said, which led old Jack to roll his eyes. How is arranging books in a library good? For a rogue from Grade E like me? He asked. I don't know, to be honest, Ryuk said. But if you're obsolete, then at least the best way to get in tune with the new world is a library. I'm sure those coquettish manners of yours as a core seller will do good in getting you promoted to librarian one day, and hopefully get noticed by some mighty old butler who like to come read in a library only to run on unpolished gem like you. You're just too smooth with them words after all, he said, watching as a gleam of light crisscrossed through old Jack's eyes. A promotion, huh? I almost forgot I still got my good orator skills. A librarian, huh? That could really help me get to know Amomara very well, he muttered to himself before rising to his feet. If you don't mind, Ryuk, I got important duties and plans to prepare for tomorrow morning. I'll take my leave now, he said, imitating the core seller old Jack from Grade E, and it cracked Ryuk up. Knock yourself out, oldie. I'm not old, he screamed out from the corner, disappearing completely from view as he took the steps to the upper floor of the building. Even after old Jack was long gone, his words still echoed in Ryuk's head as he stuffed down dish after dish into what seemed like an unending black hole. He didn't know why. Even though his stomach wasn't growling for food at all, he kept downing plate after plate. His stomach didn't bulge in the slightest, Yet none of the food went to waste. The more he ate, the more his satisfaction grew. After downing the last plate in the room, he finally felt full. But even then, his attention remained on old Jack's words. "I only get young once, huh? I guess I could take that, make some more enemy advice," he thought before rising to his feet, stacking all the dishes into the largest tray and carrying it. "Even after getting out of that restrictive area, I still feel weightless," Ryuk muttered, looking at the tray in his hands. No matter how light, it was still supposed to send some feedback of weight, but as always, Ryuk felt nothing. Although he definitely had the sensation of holding on to something, and for now, that was all he needed. He turned to the side, faintly drawing in a breath through his nose. Each smell was distinct. Along with it, he felt an image of the direction the scent came from, quickly drawing a path in his head. With a second sniff, he identified the smell and opened his eyes, locking on a corner passage. Walking forward, tray in hands, only 13 seconds passed before Ryuk arrived before a half-open door. When he entered into it, alas, it was the kitchen. He had been able to find its approximate location by tracking down the origin of the dish's scent, leading him directly here. Proved one thing. Not only did my hearing go through a substantial evolution, the same is true for my nose too. It's like their attributes have been improved by a factor of 100 from what they originally were, he noted, moving toward the sink and washing the dishes. While doing so, he heard footsteps heading toward the dining room, only to eventually halt when it reached it and resume toward the kitchen. "Moving to the dining to check if I've finished eating, in order to pack up the dishes and bring them to the kitchen," the thought echoed in Ryuk's head. Judging by the calm tempo of the feats, he already guessed who it was. Knock. A knock came, followed by the soft turn of the doorknob, and peeking in from outside was none other than Mrs. Linnea. "And what's my proud, handsome boy up to?" she teased, as Ryuk turned his head slightly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Just doing some exercise," he said with a harmless shrug as she walked up to his side. "Oh, Ryuk, you don't have to get your hands dirty with such a task," she said, trying to take it from him, but he softly shook his head. "I know. And that's why I said I'm just trying to get some exercise," he reassured. Eventually, she let him continue with a sigh, standing quietly at the side. "You know, Ryuk," she called as he turned toward her. "Morgaine told me what happened. The reason why you activated that power that caused all that," she said, watching a gleam of light crisscross his purple eyes. "She did. Yes. And I just want to say thank you," she said, watching as his eyebrows gently creased. "For what?" "For sticking with her when she was helpless. Even though here in Amomara, it's clear how status seems to determine everything, even possessing a little less of it can make you looked down upon as lesser by many. And even Morgaine, being the chosen one, didn't seem spared from being looked down upon by the elders of the Dominaire family. I love that you stood up for her. Didn't just let it slide, even though things would have been totally fine and no one would have questioned you if you hadn't," she said, to which Ryuk nodded. "And I'm glad you see it that way. Right now would have been the perfect time to scold you for activating a forbidden skill and getting yourself in danger for such a thing. But now I know better," she said, watching him chuckle. "Good for me, Porus, then," he said, and she chuckled at his uncouth words. It was something she had been trying to erase from her husband's mouth, but it seemed to have rubbed off on Ryuk too. It would take more than a scolding to knock out the rough edges, but he made her happy. For that, she could let him off this one time. Ryuk finished washing the utensils, draining the foam before rinsing them in warm water. Mrs. Linnea simply stood at the side, a dreamy mist in her eyes. "Isn't he just perfect?" The thought echoed in her head. She knew. Ryuk was not only devastatingly handsome, he is also incredibly charming, yet carries none of the arrogance or womanizing traits that usually accompany those who possess such qualities. Not only did he excel in physical prowess, being the strongest in their small family, but his love for her daughter, though never worded, was clear. He hadn't hesitated to fight an elder beyond the eternal, just for the fact that the man had looked down on Morgaine as a fallen. He is fiercely protective, and he is very easygoing, Not once had she seen him in any real quarrel with her daughter, except during the times she had a hand in it. While she had once thought that particular event would be enough to shatter their bond, she had been proven wrong, and had watched as their relationship only grew stronger. To her, one might say he was merely the boyfriend of her daughter, but the bond he had with them now was thicker than many women shared with their own sons. He understood her husband in areas where she was only just beginning to grasp, and he had earned his trust, something she knew wasn't easy. To their little family, he was a blessing. One they still couldn't believe they'd been lucky enough to receive. That was why, to her, he wasn't just the perfect man for her daughter. He was also the son she never knew she needed. "That reminds me," Ryuk said after finishing the dishes, drying his wet hands with a towel nearby. A soft glow began to coalesce in his palms, and Mrs. Linnea watched as a golden card appeared in his grasp. He handed it to her. "This looks like the Amamoran Visa card," she said, and Ryuk nodded. "It is. After I passed the test and became an archguard, they mentioned a service I'd be informed about in 3 days. But I think I missed it and clueless about what to do next," he admitted, watching as a beam of light shone from Mrs. Linnea's right pupil and scanned the golden card. "I'm using my device to interpret the card for you," she explained. Soon, a few new holograms flickered into the air, revealing to both Ryuk and Mrs. Linnea. Among the most eye-catching was a blinking timer and a negative counter. Looking closer, he could make out messages and a specific location. "Seems like they already sent you a message and a venue for a meeting," she said, expanding the holograms. "I had no idea," Ryuk muttered. "And they're deducting 100 Amamoran points from your panel every day you fail to show up. It's been pending all this time. Quite harsh." She handed the card back to him. "But I think I know the venue they're directing you to. The new work week starts tomorrow. I'll decode the location before morning and check the Amanet for any information that might help. Just make sure you wake up early, okay?" she added. Ryuk nodded and took the card. "Thank you. Morgane's still in the family grounds, right?" She nodded again. "She lives there now but comes home once every full moon. You don't have to worry, as I'm sure she's doing just fine." From the side window, he could see the fading light of the sunset. "I'll see you tomorrow then, Mrs. Linnea," he said. "Your room is on the eastern side of the 2nd floor. Good night, Ryuk," she replied with a wave as he disappeared upstairs. She grabbed a refresher bottle, spritzing the air before switching off the lights and heading back to her room. The sound echoed through the Amamoran-designed bedroom, rhythmic finger taps against a table. They came from Ryuk, who lay on the bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling with a neutral expression. While it looked like he was simply staring, the truth from his point of view was far more complex. Before him, a panel hovered. System upgrading, 97%. Estimated time left, 10 minutes. A system upgrade, huh? That's new, he thought, resuming his tapping. Exactly 10 minutes later, a new panel appeared. System upgrade complete. Adapting to the host's new essence. Adapting and creating new system tabs. Gathering stats and radaring essence and associated bonds. Full scan completed. Rebooting system. 1%, 32%, 67%, 92%, 100%. System upgrade and reboot complete. Welcome back, Ryuk. The panel blinked to life with a voice just as he remembered it, except even clearer this time. Hey system, Ryuk replied aloud. Accessing command possible. Activating system interface. Would host like to activate system interface? Yes. System interface 2.0. Name Ryuk Null. Race, Beyonder Dragon. Age, 18. Level, 186. EXP, 2992000/25 million. Cultivation. Current energy Hurricane Essence. Cultivation stage, Imitation stage. Hurricane to body sync, 70%. Energy state, stable. Hurricane energy points, 10,000. It's quite the change, Ryuk muttered. eyes scanning the panel. The design and elaborate cultivation classifications were vastly different from what he was used to. Looks like I clocked another year while I was in slumber. Officially an adult now, he mused, chuckling softly. But his attention drifted to the race tag. Both of my original bloodlines are truly gone for good. He examined the cultivation stats. All my previous energies, gone. Now I only have hurricane energy. Furthermore, it's in a stable state. And my current cultivation is the imitation stage? So, hurricane energy has its stages too. Good thing the system recognizes that. Hurricane to body sync. I don't fully understand it, but from the name I get the idea. And 70% is quite the number. But 25 million EXP for the next level? That's insane. Ryuk furrowed his brows. He had just over 2 million for now. Gathering the remaining experience naturally would take far too long, unless he completed some really difficult quests or stumbled upon level-up cards. At this point, level-up cards were his best bet, as waiting to farm 25 million EXP wasn't ideal at all. He moved on to the next tab. Attribute Panel, 10,000. Formerly, Strength, Raw Might Planetary Force Output. Velocis 10,000. Formerly, Agility, Speed, Maneuverability, Phase Shift. 10,000. Formerly, Endurance, Resilience, Regeneration, Collapse Limit. 10,000. Formerly, Intelligence, Multiversal Comprehension System Hack. 5,000. Formerly, Charisma, Presence, Pressure, Divine Influence, Advanced Attributes. 10,000. 5,000. 1,000. 5,000. 12,000. 5.0. Chaos left in the wake of presence. Important note, all advanced attributes cannot be artificially increased with attribute points. Attributes points possessed, 0. The name of each stat had undergone quite a significant change, but not only that, the majority of stat points had increased. My previous highest stats points were 6,000, and now the majority of them are at 10,000. That's a 4,000 point increase, Ryuk muttered, analyzing the interface in depth. Now, it makes sense why, even though my last level was kept, the experience point needed is 25 million. That is what the system thinks is an appropriate number to increase my current power level. And seems like there are more new stats too, Ryuk thought, looking through the advanced skill panel. Previously, the system only analyzed 5 of his stats, but now, the total number it tracked accurately had risen to 11. While the advanced stats couldn't be upgraded with attribute points, and would most likely evolve or shift based on the system scans and future growth, Ryuk still found the expansion to be a massive upgrade. With this, he could finally monitor his overall balance and pinpoint his weakest areas, knowledge that would help him quickly address and improve where he was lacking. And right now, that weakness was clear. Energy control, sitting at just 1,000 points, followed closely by willpower. Truly an upgrade. But still, there's something I don't understand, Ryuk muttered as he sat up in bed. Possessing the Null bloodline gave me the power to wield abyssal energy, while the Jade Dragon bloodline allowed me to use Aetheris. But Apex energy, it was an energy I gained from my pets, Frost from Isha and Void energy from Void. Why are they both gone? He wondered, his eyebrows tightly knitted. Even though he knew that even if his previous bloodlines were stripped away from him, he would lose Aetheris and abyssal energy. But he should still possess his Frost and Void cultivation, which had been a certainty in his heart. And yet somehow they were gone. That was beyond his calculations, and it left him frowning deeply. System, where are my Void and Apex Frost energies? They weren't tied to either of my bloodlines. Why are they gone too? Query registered. Explanation incoming. A pause, then line after line began flowing across his interface. Notice, upon transition into the Beyonder Dragon bloodline, all prior essence channels were forcibly restructured. Your new race, Beyonder Dragon, possesses the trait Null Rejection. Null Rejection. All pre-existing energy types and channels are forcibly purged from the host's essence circuit. This includes any bond-based energy traces that are not innate to the host's current soul thread. Your primordial gate, once tied to your former bloodlines, has also sealed itself. Access to the House of Apex and Void energies has been revoked until alternate methods of reintegration are discovered. Ryuk's eyes narrowed. So, I've lost them for good. Tisk, all that pain from cultivating that Azura Void manual. All the mutation skills, Abyssal Claws, Abyssal Void Steps, Abyssal Spine, Monarch's Core, the Void Domain expansion, my Frost Domain expansion, all those comprehension, all gone. Ryuk thought, a feeling of soreness enveloping his heart. But then, the system notification panel pulsed again, a new set of words appearing that drew back his attention. Not necessarily. What do you mean? Why not check out your new skill tabs? The system's tone was almost cryptic. Without wasting another second, Ryuk immediately navigated to the Skills and Abilities tab. Something popped up the moment he shifted his attention.
SKLLS và ABLITS.
Beast Sovereign Class Skills. Rooted in host's original role as a Beast Master Sovereign. King's Aura, LV.1. Type. Beast Sovereign Skill Mode. Passive-active hybrid. Description. Exudes a commanding aura that enhances the combat potential of bonded beasts. Plus 50% attack boost to all bonded beasts. Enemy beasts in range lose morale. Wild beasts are more likely to submit to the host's will. Bonus trait. Beast Magnetism. Natural affinity with wild creatures. Anunnaki Typeform Skills. A class of skills developed from host's unique body structure upgrades. Sovereign Rewriting. Max level. Type. Anunnaki Typeform Skill Mode. Active. Description. Originally limited to simple atomic adjustments, this skill has now evolved into its final form due to the host achieving sufficient intelligence. The user can now alter matter, energy, and even basic life forms by rewriting their core structure and properties. New capabilities at max level. Living Rewrite. Modify or restore basic life forms, including beast companions. Excludes divine entities. Energy Rewriting. Deconstruct, merge or reforge energy techniques and unstable energy types. Memory Fabrication. Save and recreate objects or constructs that the user has previously rewritten. Time Locking. Freeze any rewritten object at a specific moment in its condition or state. Excessive or repeated use may increase entropy fallout, leading to temporary debuffs or system strain. New Bloodline Skills. Abilities born from the host's transformation into a Beyonder Dragon. Beyonder Dragon. LV.1. Type. Bloodline Core Skill Mode. Passive/active. Description. Inherited from a transcendent dragon species erased from recorded time. Effects. Base stat override. Any physical stat under 20,000 is temporarily raised to 20,000. Fate Lock. Passive chosen actions succeed unless overruled by a stronger concept than Beyond. Presence Compression. Within 3M, enemies suffer. Minus 80% resistance, minus 70% action speed, minus 50% mental clarity. Autofail for skills below Eternal Tier. More abilities unlock as this skill levels up. Potential unlocked paths. Time Eclipse. Beyond Breath. Multiversal Step. Echo Library. LV.1. Type. Bloodline Memory Construct Mode. Passive/active. Description. A metaphysical library embedded within the host's soul space. It contains resonance echoes of energies, elements, and techniques the host has once mastered. Key functions. Mimics techniques from lost energies via hurricane essence imitation. Requires vivid memory recall to access each echo. Skills accessed are partial but usable based on memory clarity. Skill slots. 4/24 unlocked. Ability upgrade cards possessed. 101. Special evolution cards possessed. 1. If I remember correctly, last time, I was trying to free up 2 spaces from my skill slots. I only succeeded in removing 1, bringing my total unlocked slots to 23. But now, all my skills are down to 4? Seems like those lost bloodlines truly played a big part in what skills I could hold, he said aloud. At that flash of realization, a memory returned to him, the Nullic words echoing through his mind. If you weren't half Null and half Jade Dragon, then what would you be, if not nothing? Well, do I look down bad right now? Ryuk said out loud, but then his expression crumbled soon enough as he whispered. Yes. My skills and abilities tab ain't what it used to be. It used to be filled with power, and now it's nearly empty. It looks dull. That's true. You have been pummeled to the first floor from the 23rd. The system dished from the side. Can't argue that, Ryuk said downcast, but suddenly his eyes lit up. But hey, look on the bright side. I finally have space for new skills. A total of 20 open slots. I can now begin gaining new skills without worrying about random skill activations, my body forcefully fusing techniques, or regressing into an apex predator stage that could override my identity. He said, listing out the dangers the system had warned him of having his skills slot used up. And you know what the scrap hunters say? Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you start to pummel down? He added, trying to motivate himself, though his brow creased. Wait. That doesn't sound right. I think it is. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you can start to climb back up. That's what I wanted to say? And hey system, you know what we'll do now? What? Now we start climbing.